Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Konitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, Chapter 74, text 20 through 21, and we'll chant 20 together. Yad Atmakam Idam Vishvam Kratavashchayad Atmakam Agnid Ahutayo Mantra Shankyam Yogashayat Paraha Yad Atmakam Idam Vishvam Kratavashchayat Atmaka Agnirahutayo Mantra Sankyam Yogashayat Paraha Yad Atmakam Idam Vishvam Kratavashchayat Atmaka Agnirahutayo Mantra Sankyam Yogashayat Paraha. Please chant. Yad Atmakam Idam Vishvam Kratavashchayat Atmaka Agnirahutayo Mantra Shankyam Yogashayat Paraha Yad Atmakam Idam Vishvam Kratavashchayat Atmaka Agnirahutayo Mantra Sankyam Yogashayat Paraha. Thank you very much for chanting. And I guess I'll do text 21 since the translation is for both of them. Ekai Vadvijyo Sav Altad Atmyam Idam Jagat Atma Atmasraya Shabhyam Sirjati Avati Hanti Ajaha. So the word for word, Yat Atmakam. You can repeat. Yat Atmakam. Founded upon whom? Idam, this. Vishvam, universe. Kratavaha, great sacrificial performances. Cha, and. Yat Atmaka, founded upon whom? Agni, the sacred fire. Ahutaya, the oblations. Mantra, the incantations. Sankyam, the doctrine of philosophic investigation. Yoga, the art of meditation. Cha, and. Yat, at whom. Paraha, aimed. So the translation is as follows by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. This entire universe is founded upon him, as are the great sacrificial performances. And this is Sahadev speaking, addressing a whole assembly just before the Rajasuya sacrifice. This entire universe is founded upon him, as are the great sacrificial performances with their sacred fires, oblations, and mantras. Sankhya and Yoga both aim towards him, the one without a second. O assembly members, that unborn Lord, relying solely on himself, creates, maintains, and destroys his cosmos by his personal energies, and thus the existence of this universe depends upon him alone. And there's no purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, so I'll just do the pranam prayers and then we can proceed. Om Jnana Timrandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Brijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Shah. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnebhyo namo namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Ramapada Swami Iti Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. There's a commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and in commenting, he notes that Sahadev, it's the younger brother of Maharaj Yudhisthira, is expanding on his previous statements. So yesterday we heard a different statement that he made, but today we're concentrating on this one. So, and it's quite a complex one. And this is how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who always knows the heart of the devotee, how he words what Sahadev is saying. So this is the words of Sahadev as per Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Krishna alone is the aim. And the word that we chanted, it's the last words in the verse, Yat Paraha, he's the aim, of Jnana, and the word for that was Sankhya, and Ashtanga Yoga. Krishna is Advitya, one without a second, and nothing is different from him, since he's the one with everything. Asat Atmyam. O members of the assembly, being his own shelter, Krishna is not dependent on anyone else. So it's quite a big emphasis on Krishna alone being the aim of Jnana and Ashtanga Yoga. So I'm putting a lot of focus on that through this class. And I think it's also that I got inspired because this past weekend, Subal did a presentation in a little town in Indianapolis, or in Indiana, and many in the audience were aspirant yoga teachers. So he's developed, I had never heard any of his classes on teaching yoga practitioners who were to become yoga teachers about how the yogic process leads right into bhakti yoga. So anyway, I found it completely fantastic. So I'm drawing just completely, I'm sticking straight to the Bhagavad Gita. He did it spontaneously, a whole hour long, and all these yoga teachers got so excited they couldn't get enough books to take home. So, anyway, it was super fantastic because I'd never heard him speak on to that audience before, although I know he has developed courses and he has taught in one of the big yoga centers here in Chicago to that audience. So anyway, here's my staying very safely sticking to Krishna's statements. Here we go. Now, there's in Srila Vishwanath stating that Krishna alone is the aim of Jnana and Astanga Yoga, because he's drawing from Sahadev's statement, and Sahadev's statement was Sankhya and Yoga both aim towards him, the one without a second. One can understand that these are procedures for becoming liberated. And in the Jnana Yoga chapter of Bhagavad Gita, like we usually, in the translation from Srila Prabhupada, it's called Transcendental Knowledge, that chapter. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he's translating Bhagavad Gita, he entitles that chapter Jnana Yoga. And Lord Krishna there paints a picture of different categories of persons who become serious about liberation from material bondage. So Krishna explains, this is the first category of persons. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some of them offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. So he's looking at two categories of people. This is 425. Now, the different kinds of sacrifice by different types of performers, because these are yogic practitioners. So, we're going to look at all the different categories of yogis. So the different kinds of sacrifice by different kinds of performers has Srila Prabhupada saying that this is only a superficial demarcation of the varieties of sacrifice. And sacrifice factually means to satisfy the Supreme Lord. So it just looks like different categories of sacrifice, but every one of them has the same aim. And that was what Sahadev was stating. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was also stating the aim is one, actually. It's towards the Supreme Lord or for him. And now, that Supreme Lord is Lord Vishnu. That's usually to whom sacrifices are offered. And he's known as Yagna, the recipient of yagyas or sacrifices. In fact, Srila Prabhupada states that all the different varieties of sacrifice, it means something you're giving up, and here he's going to explain it, can be divided into two categories. First, there's sacrifice of worldly possessions. And then there's sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. So what you're giving up in order to achieve something. So that's what sacrifice is. So there's one category where you're giving up your worldly possessions. The second category is sacrifice that you're making, something you're giving up in order to gain transcendental knowledge. Now, Srila Prabhupada explains it this way. Those who are in Krishna consciousness, so that's the bhakti yogi, he sacrifices all material possessions for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. While others who want some temporary material happiness sacrifice their material possessions to satisfy demigods, such as Indra, the sun god, etc. So that's a very interesting thought. Like the Krishna conscious practitioner or the bhakti yogi is actually sacrificing their worldly possessions. And the reason for that is because one isn't pursuing something like material, because naturally if you're pursuing, then it's growing. So you're sacrificing just by virtue of the fact that you're not pursuing necessarily with that with gusto acquiring material things. So this is how Srila Prabhupada puts it. Gradually, the karma yogis, so these are the ones that are performing sacrifice to please the demigods. They're called karma yogis. Such as Indra or Varuna, in whom this is Krishna talking. And this is actually coming from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's translation of Bhagavad Gita 4.25. So Krishna says, gradually the karma yogis performing yagya to please the demigods have the demigods such as Indra and Varuna, in whom I, so this is Krishna talking, have delegated authority, become satisfied. Gradually, such karma yogis come to the platform of selfless karma yoga. So that's Krishna speaking and how he explains it. So you can see the one path is going to gradually lead to the other path. So the one of sacrificing material possessions in order to please demigods is going to ultimately lead to that selfless kind of position where you're not considering yourself, as is the case with the bhakti yogis. And then there are others, the impersonalists. So these are also yogis. They sacrifice their identity or their material designations. So whatever it is that somebody, like each of us as we travel through the material life, we come to get some title according to our occupation, or sometimes the title may even be some title in front of our name because that occupation calls for that. So those are material designations. And the impersonal yogi, he actually sacrifices his identity. So this is how it's put. By merging into the existence of impersonal Brahman. So all those material designations fall away because they're actually sacrificing themselves into the impersonal Brahman. And Krishna says this. So the Jnani yogis have as their slogan, so these are the impersonalists, they're called the Jnani yogis. They have as their slogan, this is their slogan, the Vedic statement, Tat Tvam Asi. So it's like a slogan. So they chant the mantra Om, and they sacrifice the Tvam, or the spirit soul, into the Tat, the complete whole, which is Brahman. So they have the slogan, Tat Tvam Asi. So that's how they're seeing it. They're completely giving up their identity, sacrificing it into Brahman. So this latter, the Jnani yogis, they're sacrificing their time in philosophical speculation. That's how they're using their time for transcendental knowledge. And it means that they're actually interested in understanding the transcendental nature of the Supreme. So the sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge is in fact spiritual cultivation. So this category of yogis, they're actually cultivating something spiritual as compared to, let's say, the karma yogis. because they're actually looking still for material something. So, and also they are considered, the karma yogis are considered to be performing formal sacrifice, like doing this, sacrificing this possession, please the demigods, but to get something back that will enhance their material comfort. So it's interesting, you give a little to get much more. That's the karma yogis. So again, Krishna alone is the aim of even the Jnana yogis, because they're looking at his effulgence, the Brahman, that they're going to merge and lose their identity within. And why they're even using their time in speculation is they're trying to understand transcendental reality or the nature of the Supreme. Now, Krishna continues to demarcate the different persons who become serious about becoming liberated from material bondage, because these are these categories of people. So here's the next category Krishna looks at in 426 Bhagavad Gita. Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control, and others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the object of the senses in the fire of the senses. So very nice, we can look at this. So here's a completely different category. The bhakti yogis that are within the varnashram system. So the brahmachari bhakti yogis and the householder bhakti yogis. So the practitioners who observe strict celibacy, they're sacrificing their senses, such as hearing, into the fire of mental control. So it means the brahmacharis, under the care of a spiritual master, they're controlling their mind by absorbing their sense, or abstaining from sense gratification and utilizing their ear by hearing only words that concern Krishna consciousness. So, for example, they are absorbed in Nam Sankirtan, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. So they're sacrificing the hearing for only allowing words to enter that have to do with the glorification of the Lord, and that in turn is allowing for mental control. So that's the sacrifice of the celibate brahmachari bhakti yogis. Now, householders, they sacrifice the object of the senses into the fire of the senses, as we heard Krishna say. So that means that what has been sacrificed by the bhakti yogi householder is they're sacrificing a regular utilization of their senses in sex life. And so they, in fact, are restricting that. So that's the sacrifice they're making. And Srila Prabhupada puts it that, in fact, this is actually a yajna. So this is so interesting, because here we heard how the karma yogis actually have a formal sacrifice. You know, it's with the fire sacrifice. They're offering some of their wealth. The demigods are being propitiated, but they're looking for a purpose to enhance their wealth. We're hearing about the Jnani yogis who are actually sacrificing their identity, understanding themselves as one with the Supreme, meaning Brahman. And here we're hearing the Bhakti Yoga householder practitioner is actually sacrificing that kind of physiological enjoyment that would be sex life. It's actually considered a yajna, a sacrifice. So the reason this is so is that the householder is sacrificing that tendency towards gratifying his senses. Because in a household situation, one has lots of comforts. You know, one can purchase this, that, the other. So there's the householder, the Bhakti Yogi householder, he's sacrificing the tendency to gratify his senses for higher transcendental life. And that's enumerated by Lord Krishna in that statement I read to you from Bhagavad Gita 4.26. Now, the next category of sacrifices is also mentioned by Krishna. Here he puts it, and this is the next verse, 4.27. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses, they offer the function of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. See how complex it sounds. It's quite extraordinary. It's got to be, persons that truly are interested in achieving self-realization. So that statement was made by Krishna. So there's Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur putting it a little bit differently to help us to understand what Krishna has just said here. And he's talking as though it's Krishna talking, but Srila Bhaktivinoda translating the same verse that Srila Prabhupada translated. So listen to how Srila Bhaktivinoda translates it. Yogis like Patanjali, who propitiate the philosophy of merging into the existence of Brahman and who search after self-realization, sacrifice all their sensual activities, as well as the activities of the 10 types of life air, into the fire of the pure spirit soul. So Srila Bhaktivinoda, he writes this way. The spirit soul, who is inclined towards material enjoyment, is called Paragatma. And the spirit soul who is inclined towards renunciation is called Pratyagatma. So 2 different terms because the spirit soul makes that choice. So such persons conclude that there is nothing superior to Pratyagatma. So there's nothing superior to actually moving towards renunciation. So this category of persons, the impersonalists, those that's a description of those impersonal jnanis. Like they actually are sacrificing all their sensual activities. So it sounds very similar to the Bhakti Yogis, doesn't it? But it's very much connected to controlling the breath. And so in the Patanjali system of yoga, the instruction is on how to control the functions of the body. So that's where the focus is, and particularly the body's air. So there are 10 kinds of air that are moving in the body. And in a very technical manner, these yogis, using the Patanjali system of yoga, they try and do it such that ultimately all the functions of the air within become favorable for purifying the soul. So that's the means for purifying the soul. So notice how different it is from the Bhakti Yogi brahmacharis practicing celibacy. It's controlling the senses, particularly the hearing, or the householder controlling the senses to not using the body in sensual enjoyment. Here, this particular category of impersonalist yogis following the Patanjali system, they try to purify the soul by actually controlling these airs that are present in the body. So usually the senses interact with sense objects. Like, our eye reaches out to enjoy something visual, like, looking at the beautiful Michigan lake at sunset. The eye reaches out. So it means that the sense is interacting with the sense object. And in the same way, one may actually use one's hand for touching. So there may be a beautiful rose, so one will actually use one's hand to touch the soft petal. So the senses are being utilized in connection with the sense object. And all of them are engaged in activities that are outside, meaning outside the body. Now, generally, there's air that goes downward within the body, and then there's also the prana. So Vyana Vayu acts to shrink and expand. So that's one of the airs. It shrinks and it expands. And Samana Vayu, it adjusts the equilibrium. So everything's balanced in the body. Then there's Udana Vayu, which goes upwards. And when one is enlightened, one engages all of these in searching for self-realization. So that's the whole focus, to control the movement of the airs up and down so they become neutralized. And in terms of Lord Krishna being the aim of yoga, he explains. So here's Krishna in 429. So he's looking at all these categories of persons who are interested in self-realization, who started to take it very seriously, how they approach it. Others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint, to remain in trance practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others curtail the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. So very interesting. Here's another form of sacrifice. And this system of yoga that Krishna has just described for controlling the breathing process is called pranayama. So that's sort of fairly common where we live. And it's practiced in the Hatha Yoga system through the different sitting postures. So these processes allow for controlling the senses and for advancing in spiritual realization. That's actually the purpose of the pranayama, the control of the breath through performing the different sitting postures. One is actually trying to control the senses. And it allows one to advance in spiritual realization. That's actually what the purpose is. So, like what I was mentioning, yoga teachers coming to hear how their hatha yoga and their pranayama is actually should be leading towards looking at self-realization and should ultimately be leading to bhakti yoga is very natural. So this system of yoga for controlling the breathing process, pranayama, as we said, it's practiced in the hatha yoga system through the different sitting postures. And these processes allow for controlling the senses and for advancing in spiritual realization. I repeat it again because it's very important. It's a point that's missed completely. It's not just so that you feel good. It's not a feel-good exercise. And this particular, this control of the breath in the Hatha Yoga system is actually mentioned in the tantric literature. So, we get something like hot yoga. It's because it's coming from the tantric literature. And it goes along with taking strict vows. So it's connected to the whole section in the tantric literature that deals with also taking strict vows. So again, the apana air goes downwards and the prana goes up. And the pranayamic yogi, he practices breathing the opposite way until the currents are neutralized. Quite something. Into equilibrium. So there's an equilibrium. And that equilibrium is called puraka. That's the term that's used. So when both currents, the incoming and the outgoing breath, are stopped, one is said to be in kumbhaka yoga. So by practice of Kumbhaka Yoga, one can increase the duration of life. And the purpose for increasing the duration of life is to become perfect in spiritual realization. So quite interesting, the different outlets that are there when one starts to become interested in becoming free from, this material grip, this grip of being caught up by our senses demanding so much. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that these 4 kinds of sacrifices are found, and the sacrifice of one's possessions, so that's called Dravya Yagya, so sacrifice of one's possessions, Tapa Yagya, or performing severe austerities such as Chandranya or Chaturmasya. So we've heard about one of our famous devotees in ISKCON practicing the Chaturmasya Aindra Prabhu. So, you eat for a 4-month period through the rainy season in India, where you actually don't utilize your hands, but you eat in a bending position. So you try and take with your mouth, bending down. And that's, of course, very uncomfortable because, the digestive system is a little contorted. And you just take as much as you're able to take with your mouth while in a bent position. So that's another severe austerity, Tapayagya it's called. There's Yoga Yagya, or mastering of the 8-fold mystic perfections, and Jnana Yagya, or cultivating the power to discriminate between matter and spirit. So those are the 4 kinds of yagyas that are there according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So those who perform these 4 kinds of sacrifice are understood to have taken strict vows. So you have to have taken some sort of very strict vow to practice Tapayagya, the one we know of, like Chaturmasya. You have to have taken a vow. I'm going to do this for a 4-month period every day, once a day or whatever. All these practitioners understand the meaning of sacrifice, and they become purified of all sinful reactions by performing these sacrifices. So every one of these kinds of sacrifices are actually eliminating the reactions of previous sinful activities. So quite extraordinary. And of course, in the case of the Jnana Yagya, which I described in more detail, the philosophical speculators, they are considered to partake of the remnants of sacrifice known as nectar. So there's nectar for them too in their philosophical speculation. And ultimately, they merge into Brahman, the undivided, massive spiritual being of Krishna. And now, Srila Jiva Goswami, he notes that all of these are reasons that are given for Krishna being everything. So I've gone into a huge breakdown of one of the statements of Sahadev, that because he's having to have everybody understand that Krishna is the personality that should first be worshipped in this great sacrifice that Maharaj Yudhisthira has been performing. So this is one of the statements he made, that Krishna is the aim of Ashtanga Yoga and Jnana Yoga. So hence I've done this breakdown of the different kinds of sacrifice and the different kinds of yogis. Now, the next part is, and I'm drawing from Srila Jiva Goswami's commentary because Sahadev's statement is so powerful, because the next part of his statement is that assembly members, that unborn Lord, relying solely on himself, creates, maintains, and destroys this cosmos by his personal energies. And thus the existence of this universe depends on him alone. So this is Srila Jiva Goswami, who's taking Sahadev's statement, and he knows that there are reasons that are being given for Krishna being everything. And the source of unlimited universes is Krishna. So that's what Sahadev is announcing to this assembly, because some of them are not very sure. And imagine they're hearing the source of unlimited universe is Krishna, the same personality that's standing here right before you. He's the source of unlimited universes. Just as the sun is the source of rays. So that's the simile that Srila Jiva Goswami uses. That Krishna is the source of universes in the same way that the sun is the source of its rays. So here's the proof of that. In Bhagavad Gita, in the 10th chapter, text 8, Krishna says it of himself. So see how knowledgeable Sahadev is, because he's taking these very elaborate statements of Krishna. I've broken down 4 of them. And here's another one. And Sahadev puts it so simply, like a couple of sentences. Krishna says, I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. So, quite beautiful, really. So, a person who has studied the Vedas perfectly, he knows that Krishna is the origin of everything. And both in the material and spiritual worlds, Krishna is the origin of everything. And because somebody who studied the Vedas well, because he knows this, he becomes firmly fixed in service, in devotion to Lord Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada explains it this way. Krishna is the source of Brahma, Shiva, and all other demigods. So remember the Karmi yogis? So Krishna is the source of Brahma, Shiva, and all other demigods. And he gives the proof. So Srila Prabhupada being having perfectly understood all the Vedas and having studied them very well, here's a nice proof for us. The Atara Veda says, it was Krishna who in the beginning instructed Brahma in Vedic knowledge and who disseminated Vedic knowledge in the past. In the beginning and in the past, it's Krishna who disseminated that knowledge. It's Krishna who created Brahma. So that's the Atara Veda. And the Narayan Upanishad says this. Then the Supreme Personality of Narayan desired to create living entities. From Narayan, Brahma is born, and from Narayan, the patriarchs are also born. From Narayan, Indra is born. From Narayan, the 8 Vasus are born. And from Narayan, the 11 Rudras are born. From Narayan, the 12 Adityas are born. This Narayan is the expansion of Krishna. So there's the Narayan Upanishad. So everything goes back to Krishna. He's the source, the origin of everything in the material and spiritual worlds. Now, in the same Vedas, it is stated. So here's another quote. The son of Devaki is the supreme personality of Godhead. That's from the Narayan Upanishad too. Krishna is the source of all generations, and he is called the most efficient cause of everything. Everything functions beautifully because Krishna is the source of it. And there's no supreme controller other than Krishna. So, and in the particular text we were doing, there's a word ekha, and Srila Jiva Goswami says that this indicates rejection of anything being equal to Krishna. Just the usage of this word by Sahadev. You have to reject that there's anything that can be equal to, or anyone equal to Krishna. And then there's another word, and Srila Jiva Goswami says that the word advitya indicates the rejection of anything other than him. So reject anything other than Krishna. And the word eva indicates anything else is impossible. So it's really emphasized. Reject anything other than Krishna. anything else is impossible. So this is how Sahadev is communicating to this audience present at this Rajasuya sacrifice. So everything is one with Krishna. Etat Atmyam. So that's as far as I was able to go with understanding or drawing a little bit from the Acharyas for this particular verse. Is there any thought on the subject matter, anything that can expand our discussion? Please feel free.
Thank you, Mataji. That's real mind blowing, but understandable though. But I was thinking, the yogis, their purpose is sacrifice, right? So, all these different, like you said, they try to. One yogi, he said, Paranayana yoga, something like that. And he said he tried to reverse the breath, try to change the breath to go in the opposite direction. So I'm saying, how do you do that? But by us being bhakti yoga, being in bhakti yoga, we qualify. We already qualify because we perform the highest sacrifice for the Lord. So we qualify to perform all these other yogas if we want to. That's my question, first of all.
The question is the Bhakti Yogi, because he's performing the greatest sacrifice, because he's sacrificing, I take it, he's performing the greatest sacrifice, you stated. And the question is, how? Repeat it.
We qualify because we practice bhakti yoga, the highest sacrifice. So we could learn these other yogas, or we could perfect them if we really wanted to. We have the ability or the know-how already because we practice bhakti yoga.
So, oh, very nice. So the logic you're presenting, Lesham Prabhu, is that here's the Bhakti Yogi, that particular practitioner is performing the greatest sacrifice. Therefore, it implies that basically the Bhakti Yogi has the capacity to both comprehend and possibly even perform the other processes of yoga, because after all, he's at the top of the yogic lot. That's logically, it makes perfect sense. But of course, the Bhakti Yogi has come to his position over many lifetimes. And usually one takes up anything that was performed in the Bhakti Yoga realm from previous lifetimes. So actually, one's been going for many lifetimes, possibly already on the yogic path. And whether it is that one progressively went through the other categories, that need not be. It may not be that one was first Kami yogi, offering sacrifices to the demigods, although many persons do go through that path for many lifetimes as the soul becomes, as they purifying themselves of all sinful reactions. And then at the point when they're coming to Bhakti Yoga, it's understood that all sinful reactions have fallen away. So it's possible. And then that somebody may have actually been a Jnani yogi, an impersonalist, and then comes to Bhakti Yoga. The Jnani yogi is aiming towards merging into Brahman. So there isn't a personal conception of Krishna, but there's that great desire to understand transcendental reality. So whether one actually went through this or the other process, the Gyani Yogi who controls follows the Patanjali, or the Hatha Yogi who follows the Patanjali system and is trying to control the breath and the life, is whether one has actually gone through that process and come to Bhakti Yoga. It doesn't mean that each and every one of us has gone through one of those three categories and then come to Bhakti Yoga. It doesn't necessarily mean that, because the understanding is that the Bhakti Yogi has received the seed of Bhakti given by an advanced Bhakti Yogi. So the seed of devotion has been planted by an advanced Bhakti Yogi for the Bhakti Yogi practitioner. But clearly there has been purification that has brought one to this position that allows one to receive that seed. So it's hard to know, but certainly I don't know whether one could say that one automatically could be a Hatha Yoga practitioner and controlling the breath perfectly as a Bhakti Yogi. I don't know if one could say that. And it may not have been the path that one followed. I mean, one may have been a Karma Yogi. I mean, you find certainly in the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, one comes across many Karma Yogis. Many. So they may not be at the point of coming to Bhakti Yoga, but they've been exposed to it. So purification is going on nevertheless. And at one point, it does happen. For oneself, one doesn't know, but at least one can be sure that the seed of Bhakti Yoga or devotion was planted in the heart by a more advanced transcendental Bhakti Yogi practitioner.
So we're very fortunate.
Yes.
We're very fortunate.
Yes.
Like you said, there's many yogis out there that's on a high level, very high level, very serious about their practice, but they haven't quite reached that point. They're right here, but they haven't reached that point of bhakti yoga. They haven't been planted, or they haven't reached that point through their practice, Yes. But because you can't reach it, that's what it's about, reaching it through your practice of yoga. That's what you said over the years. And then the seed is planted by a pure devotee. So, and we're very fortunate.
Yes. Yes, very, 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 very fortunate.
And when you get classes like that, you see, like you said, it's a ball game, that class, it made you see that, hey, how this yogi thing is, everything is connected up to Krishna and Bhakti.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and literally seeing those Hatha Yogic practitioners flying towards the books because they saw the connection. So, and Krishna himself paints the picture, Yeah, it's quite wonderful. Yeah, so I understood it just through graphically seeing those Hatha Yoga practitioners gravitating towards the books on Bhakti Yoga. After having it presented to them, they could see the connection. So, yeah.
They see that class.
Yeah, I don't know if it was recorded, but it was certainly very exciting.
Thank you much.
Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Yes, it can help. It can help. It can